Welcome to this meeting of the District Plan Review Subcommittee. Welcome to interested members and ratepayers in the room with us and anyone watching online. I've called for apologies. I believe that we have apologies from Councillors McCone and Blackler. Moved by Councillor Linwood, seconded by Mayor Kircher. All those in favour of receiving the apologies say aye. Carried. Are there any declarations of interest in the room? There are none to be noted. So we move on to the business at hand, and it is confirmation of the previous minutes, starting with, of course, the item 3.1.
May I ask a question, Mr. Chair?
You certainly may, Councillor Hopkins.
I'm looking at the agenda for this morning, and the first item I can see is resolution to accept or defer late agenda items.
That's part 2 of the agenda, Councillor.
No, it's not. It's the beginning. It's the first. There's a long list of matters in front of us today, and the first one is final agenda papers part 1, which is what I have just tapped, and that's what comes up.
Well, my agenda, Councillor Hopkins, is talking of 3.1 through 3.4, and then we move on to the other sets of the minutes that are in part 2 of the document.
Okay, so those ones then, for clarification and just so that anybody watching knows, 3.1, 3.2 and 3.3 and 3.4 all relate to minutes that we received in the legislated time frame.
Correct.
So all the other minutes whether there is to be consideration of any of the other minutes today will be at our discretion.
That is correct.
Okay, so we are now focusing on the meeting at
the 18th and 19th of December.
Right. Yes, I've got some matters arising. What are we going to do? Go through page by page or what?
I think that's probably the easiest way rather than us going backwards and forwards, Councillor.
Through you, Mr. Chair, these ones were the ones that were originally included in the agenda papers that went to the 5th of December meeting, which were deferred. During that time, I put them into the convene review room, and Councillor Hopkins has made some minor grammatical changes on those, and they have now been updated with those changes, and they have been. So this version is the ones that were updated after what he had amended. Thank you.
Well, sorry, correction. Councillor Hopkins also raised on page 4, page 5, page 8, page 10, page 11, page 14, page 16, page 17, and page 18 matters of meaning, which could not have been corrected prior to being discussed by this committee today.
All right, well, let's start with and basically the minutes as such start on page 9 of our agenda in front of us. We're all...
Mr. Chair, the first of my matters of meaning on page 4.
So you have no matters of meaning on page 3?
No, there were two grammatical corrections on page 3 that oops, sorry, forgive me. There were two grammatical corrections on page 3 that I think can be taken as read. One was there was 1980 planning overlays. That needs to be there were 1980 planning overlays. And at the bottom, if there was an SNA in an urban area, then it would be caught. So those were both very minor grammatical ones. But on page 4,
Councillor, can I just, so that we've got two lots of page numbers. We've got page 3 in the paper and page 9 at the bottom of our page. So we're working off the numbers at the top set of numbers, so that no one's confused.
what I'm currently doing, because there are all my notations are in the documents that are in the review room. So I've gone back to that, and I'm referring to the page numbers of the minutes.
Yes, yeah, that's what I'm saying to you. We have the minute page numbers that we're working off and the agenda. So before we move off page 3, if you're finished, there is one correction that I would like in the very first chapter, where I as chair had asked for an explanation as to why the planning overlays had gone from 1980 up to a proposal of 4,000 hectares. It was actually 40,000 hectares. So there's a 0 missing out of that. Right, we move on to page 3 and we're back to you, Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, on page 3, about 2/3 of the way down the page, and there's no numbers, but it's a paragraph that begins with the two words officer response : and it goes on to say the area is factoring in sensitivities and it is very limited. Now, I don't understand what that means.
Yeah, you talked about page 3. We're on to page 4, aren't we?
Correct, that's what I said.
No, you said page 3.
Apologies.
So we need to be explicit. Yes.
Right, page 4.
And we're on the chapter that goes officer's response.
A paragraph.
Your paragraph, yeah, QE2 areas.
Yes. And the semicolon or colon thereafter, and then the phrase, the area is factoring in sensitivities and it is very limited. And I simply don't understand what that means. There's another question of meaning on that page. At the bottom, it says action officers, or it says, in fact, action officers twice, but it doesn't indicate what the action is, and it needs to.
Mr. Campbell?
Yeah, thank you. The last point, I think, relates to the sentence above, so I could just repeat that officers would check over the chapters to ensure consistency. And the sensitivities related to the Indigenous vegetation clearance.
I believe I've already changed that because the ones that are in the agenda are different.
Well, I'm sorry, they shouldn't have been changed until they had been discussed by the committee. Matters of meaning are at our discretion. Corrections might well be a matter of process, but the minutes belong to the committee.
The minutes are in the agenda, councillor.
I don't intend to have an argument, but we are the arbiters of what is in the document. We make the final decision.
Yeah.
Which is the sentence committee that he's talking
about. We are working off the unconfirmed minutes, which is published. The unconfirmed minutes as published. So where is the confusion? Because you're going back to those previous set, is that correct?
No, this is the material that was sent to us after the 5th and before today. And after the 5th and before today, we got a series of minutes in the review room. And I do not know how many councillors ended up reading all of them. I did. And there are 2 categories of corrections I have noted in those, in the review room. Category 1, typos,
Yes.
grammatical matters, simple, straightforward, easy to correct, proofreading stuff. The second category is matters of meaning. What does something that is stated in the minutes actually mean? Or does it reflect correctly what actually occurred? And in that latter category, in my view, the determination as to what should be in the finally approved minutes belongs with us. And the notion that something has been changed prior to this meeting occurring, we should either have been aware of that through the communication before the meeting, or what should be in front of us now is what we saw in the review room and what we were asked to comment on.
Through you, Mr. Chair, these minutes have been in the agenda since the 9th. So if the councillor could please tell me which sentence he's talking about, then perhaps we can sort out what the issue is.
I have told you what sentence I'm talking about. You saw the comments I made on the minutes in the review room. You actually sent out an email thanking me for making those comments. I presumed you would have read them. That my document in the review room underlines and notates the matters to be corrected.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we're trying to make this visible to those who are listening. So is it officer response, the area takes into account sensitivities and it is very limited. It is not across whole properties? Or is it the last sentence where there is less sensitive, so they have higher thresholds?
The words I underlined, and I still don't understand what they mean, and nothing said so far this morning or read makes it clear to me what was said. The words I underlined were the area is factoring in sensitivities and it is very limited. But the particular words I had no understanding of or the meaning of are those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The area is factoring in sensitivities.
So I have now found where, and the fact is that he said factoring in sensitivity. So I have discussed that with officers, and what is now in the minutes and has been there since the 9th is the area takes into account sensitivities and it is very limited. It is not across whole properties. So that is the sentence that is now in the agenda and has been since the 9th.
There are 2 matters here. One, we were asked to go through these minutes in the review room. It takes a long time to write them. It takes less time, but still a long time to read them. It is unreasonable to expect us to read them twice. Having read them in the review room and notated necessary corrections on the understanding that some could be fixed in advance and some would be resolved today, I didn't reread the agenda, the version of the minutes in the 19th, 19th December meeting in the agenda, nor were we told we needed to. No information went out to us saying corrections had already been made. And I come back to the point I've made repeatedly this morning, and I'd like the chair to rule on it. What the minutes say and what they mean is a matter for the committee. It is not a matter to be predetermined in advance and simply rubber stamped by us. It's a small but important constitutional point.
Yeah, I can sense the degree of frustration here, but if comments are made in, we've been putting minutes in the review room at the request of councillors. If there are comments made in there, then, the expectation is that they're responded to. before we get those minutes to the meeting, so that, the minutes in the agenda are the draft minutes. Those are, essentially pre-draft minutes. If this is going to cause a challenge, the simple solution is that we don't have review rooms and
Yep.
meetings in, you just consider it on the day when it comes in the draft agenda, because, if I don't know how it could be possible to determine which things, comments are to be responded to when they're in the review room and which ones aren't. If there are, things that are put in there in the review room by members to be responded to, then, unless you note that you don't want it responded to until the day, it's very difficult to get a draft set of minutes to you.
That's what my notes in the review room
Yeah,
said.
councillor,
So
please, we're aware of the work that you put in the review room. But I go back to today's agenda, and on page 6 of today's agenda, the very, not right at the bottom, on item 3.1, there is officer comment that says some minor amendments have been made to these minutes in the intervening period to improve their accuracy and to provide greater clarity of meaning where required.
That's fine. In my opinion, a minor amendment is a spelling mistake, a plural where a singular should be appropriate, should be used, an incorrect word, but matters of meaning are more substantial than not minor.
Righto. So if we're going to go to matters of meaning, are you uncomfortable with the correction or the alteration that's been made?
I would add the word the site area to the correction that's already been made. And I still don't know, in respect to the two matters at the bottom. Yes, so the second one will say officers will check. The first one, officers what? That's regarding the hydraulic function at Outlet Set.
Again, in the agenda, I have written officers to retain C, but consider deletion of landscape features, because that was what was agreed. So the actual change is actually in the officer advice after the member request. That's why it was just action. It's for officers as opposed to elected members or somebody else. So I did take on board your request to expand that out. I've clearly missed the next one. So I've written now officers to check for consistency. This is page 4. And going back to the officer response on this account, so I've now written site. So the site area takes into account sensitivities, and it is very limited. It is not across whole properties.
Mr. Campbell?
I believe the area reference is referring to the 50 square metres referred to above as opposed to the site. So it should be the area in brackets 50 square metres.
You'll have to ask the member if he's happy with that.
Councillor Hopkins, does that placate your concerns?
Yes, but this is going to be a problematic morning. I'm wondering if it's worthwhile adjourning for 5 minutes just to work out how we're going to manage this, because all of my notes relate to, well, most of them relate to documents in the review room. And it would appear that there have been more substantial changes to what is now on the agenda than I would have assumed would have been the case based on the distinction between minor and more significant corrections and who would decide what they are.
Unfortunately, some of us have actually worked off the minutes given to us, and my reading and notes that I had correlated with my diary notes of the meetings, I'm happy to continue to do that. But everyone else has got to be happy, and if you're not, we need to find you some time so that because we're going to get nowhere if we're going backwards and forwards between. Are you happy to progress, councillor Linwood, on the minutes that are in front of us? Councillor Percival? Mayor Kircher?
Yeah.
So, councillor, we need to accommodate your concerns, but the rest of us are all working off the minutes. Do you have a suggestion as to how we can assist you?
Very much you shut up and continue to hold decent matters up. So that you might now take it. Copies of the minutes in the review room. Because there are some minutes that have been provided more recently. For example, the ones on the 5th, the decision only ones that we had yesterday, the minutes of the 14/11 meeting, all of which I did see in the first instance in the agenda. So that's the one I'm going on, but some of the earlier versions of the minutes, I tried to attend to them promptly, and the version I read was a version in the review room.
Yes.
Next.
Pages and you could look at the. Mr. Cook just made a suggestion. If you wanted to sit with councillor Linwood, where she would have this version open and you would have yours, and it might be easier for you to correlate the two.
Yeah.
Take your notes with you as well, councillor.
Sorry.
No, that's fine.
May I help?
Right, so,
Mr. Chair, may I help?
sorry, Madam Chair.
Just to reassure you, if I can, councillor Hopkins, that wherever you've made grammatical changes via the review room, I have taken those into account before these minutes have been published. So where you have raised a matter of meaning, I don't know that he's listening, where you have raised a matter of meaning, I have sought views from officers to make sure that we can at least attempt to clarify what the sentence was saying.
Okay, now this is proving to be quite useful. The corrections, the matters of meaning I had identified on page 5 have been clarified and corrected in a sensible way. I had another matter of meaning on page 8. Yeah, I think at the bottom of that page just says officers. Discussion on rural action, officers to reconsider. Right. So page 10. There's a reference to discussion on the settlements and officers to action. Page 11, same thing. Page 14. Yes, there's a reference there. It says Councillor Hopkins, well, page 14. Yes, advised that he would withdraw the motion if the purpose of clarity sentence was added. If clarification, so that becomes if clarification was added, right? And officers at the bottom. Yeah. Page 16. Yeah, there's 2 officer actions. Yes, one of those is still silent. Under discussion on historic heritage chapter, action, officers. And my question, what my note in the review room was what, so there needs to be.
What you want to know what action officers took. Mr. Campbell?
So, Mr. Campbell, where I have written, if you see the officer advised that that is a process matter, instead we could say nominated by the owner. I think the on needs to come out of there. In consultation with them, and that was agreed. So officers to correct is what I will write there.
I think this might have related to the letters sent to
Thank you, Roger.
heritage building owners, but it basically officers to action. Be my understanding of that point.
I think the issue here is that the member made a request, officers either disagreed with it or said they would fix it. And if they said that it was agreed, I wrote the word action. So officers would then go away and do whatever
They had agreed.
they had agreed to do. So that's why I didn't write. But I have taken on board what Councillor Hopkins has said and added in do words. But effectively, if it was agreed, then officers would action it. That was the process that we came up with.
It's 13, it's the next one, isn't it? 13, 12, 13, 2.
So is he
So
comfortable?
does that resolve your concerns on that issue, Councillor Hopkins?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Right, we move on then, page 17.
It's clear to me, looking at the amended minutes, that the silence as to what officers we're going to do has been correctly resolved. And the same applies to page 18, so.
Right, so your next question is coming on page 19, is it?
That's it from me.
All right. Does anyone else
So,
have any questions or challenges on those minutes? I'm intending to move each set of minutes as they come for clarity's point of view. So I'm happy to move from the chair that they are true and correct record. Does someone want to second that? Councillor Linwood. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried.
if you just like to make sure you mention what the minutes are, which ones they are.
Yes, I'm just,
Say
I
that.
was actually just trying to get my head around that. So we move on to the next set of minutes, which are of the 13th of February, but it is actually the reconvened meeting of the 18th of December.
Just to refresh everybody's memory through you, Mr. Chair, we had 6 meetings that were held and reconvened as part of the 18th of December meeting, and there was a request that they were minuted separately. So 18 and 19 were a follow-on, so they were done together. Then the 13th and 7th of March is in part 2, so they've all been done separately as requested.
Yep, thank you. So Councillor Hopkins, your first question comes up on this chapter or?
Looking at, well, yes, I've got a number of questions here. They don't relate, these are questions arising from the minutes that in theory, it might be that they will need to be addressed next Tuesday. But for the sake of argument, on page 5, there's a reference to rewriting Rule 2, and this is talking about the SASM Rule 2 permitted activity number 4 that informs the 100-metre limit. And at the bottom in bold, the heading is action, Ōkaha and officers to consider. And the same applies to another matter a bit further down where it also says action, officers to consider. And I guess what I would want to know is, having considered, what has your conclusion been and when will we see it? Will that come as part of the package to be voted on and contemplated on the 17th?
If I may answer that, Mr. Chair, it's already in the council agenda. That's been published.
You may appreciate that I spent an awful lot of time going through this stuff. I haven't read that agenda yet.
Yeah, no, it's anything that was an action that was not related to something that the committee could do is addressed in Mr. Campbell's officer report to the council meeting.
Okay.
Mr. Campbell.
Thank you. Any of those sort of minor changes that were suggested have been looked at and picked up and made in the chapter that has been published for some time. So hopefully those have been picked up there, and where the support to make those changes have been made.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just adding to that, that was the purpose of these minute meetings, that as per my first overview report with the agenda to the 5th of December, it was that the minutes were to be read alongside the chapters. This is what obviously the planning manager wanted. Read the minutes, and where it says that there was to be an action or correction or something done, then that should have been seen in the track changes in the chapters. So that's what we started on the 5th, and we're continuing now.
Thank you for that.
Mr. Chair, moving on page 6, in the sort of confusion and attention to detail and all the other things, we did agree at that meeting on February that council should invite the minister to discuss directly its intentions. Did we ever actually get any response from politicians, from the minister or others, regarding either in writing or a signal of willingness to come and talk to us?
Well, certainly, I haven't received any correspondence. Has either the CE or the Mayor received any acknowledgement back from Wellington?
I have had discussions with Minister Simmons about coming and discussing this, and we certainly haven't had any positive responses to that.
We're on our own, Councillor Hopkins.
I think Mr. Campbell wants to say something.
Just to follow on at officer level, we have been kept very well informed by the Ministry of Environment. Basically, as soon as they receive instruction or updates, they're pretty quick at updating us as well. So I think there's another bill just released now for consultation. So we're looking at what's coming through pretty quickly. And the ministry officials have been very good at keeping us updated on a more regular basis, particularly because there is a fast reform process package.
So just to be totally clear, staff have been updated by the ministry. Has there been any update then by way of the members of the subcommittee in terms of instructions out of Wellington or indications that could frame our opinion making?
Yes, so in the over to council for next week's meeting, there is some commentary there on a summarised version. We'd done some briefing earlier this year on some of the changes that had been signalled by the minister. There was correspondence circulated from Minister Bishop on some of that as well to elected members. So yeah, it's trying to keep sort of abreast of sending through useful content, so it's not being overloaded with a whole lot of information. But yeah, when it's relevant and useful, we've sent that out, or it's been in papers or briefings. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Right, moving along to page 7.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, all of the corrections that I had raised on pages 7, 10, 11, 12 and 13 regarding matters of meaning, I've just checked with Councillor Linwood, and in every instance, I think the amendments or the adjustments made to the minutes now on the agenda are an accurate and correct reflection of what was said and what was done. There's one matter outstanding on the bottom of page 8 of these minutes. There's two actually. Yes, under member request, add to standard 2.8, 2 stories of maximum height. Action officers, it doesn't say what that action will be, and the same applies to the bottom of the page. So there's 2 instances there where it's not clear what officers had agreed to do or were expected to do.
Sorry, Madam Chair, but Councillor, reading the last paragraph, a member has said they would prefer a less prescriptive setback. The officer view was for compromise, and that could then be worked through in submissions.
Yes, but it goes on to say this was agreed. That's fine, and if there was nothing after that, including the words action and officers, I wouldn't have any argument. But there appears to have been some action offered by officers or expected of them.
In that case, it would be officers to consider, because they would have considered it and they would have either done something with it or not, as Mr. Campbell said on the 5th. Where there is an agreement and it says some of the advice or the request was about considering something, then it is an automatic to consider. And if they considered it, it would be in the track changes. And if they considered it and decided not to change it, then it wouldn't be visible. That was what Mr. Campbell advised to you at the 5th of December meeting.
Would the same apply to the one higher up under add to standard 2 under 0.5, 2 stories and maximum height?
Under that, I've just put officers to add because that is the action. So effectively what I'm doing there is saying that officers will do what the member requested if that is what officers said they would do.
Mr. Campbell.
Yeah, thank you. So the one about the height and the 2 stories, that has been action in terms of changing the rule to reflect that. The other matter is the governance advisor mentioned is correct.
All right. I know that this is a bit like eating Weet-Bix without milk, but we do have to get it correct. So we chew on. Councillor Hopkins.
No, as I indicated, this working with Councillor Linwood and comparing the notations I made in the review room with what's in the agenda is very helpful, and all the other matters have been, in my view, satisfactorily and correctly amended.
All right. Is there anyone else has any further questions on the set of minutes?
Those ones, mate.
All right. I'm happy to move from the chair that we confirm those minutes. Does someone want to second that? Thank you, Councillor Linwood. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. All right, we now move on to minutes for the meeting that we held on the 22nd of August. And bearing in mind that if anyone is desperately interested, these meetings have all been live streamed and are available on the council's YouTube channel.
And if I may add to that, Mr. Chair, the live stream link is at the top of every set of minutes to facilitate that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So the 22nd of August minutes are actually on page 44 of our agenda.
Hang on, I think that's, bear with me, I'll get into meetings because I have a feeling I'll put my notations on that one there. Is that final agenda paper part 1 or part 2? And page number? Mr. Chair, there's no, I've got notes here that there were minor corrections on pages 3 and 4, but I can't even find them now, so I'm not gonna. They were both grammatical only, so.
Yeah, no, I thought that this was reasonably straightforward, and of course it was also where we started working through our mapping process. No questions on those minutes? Would someone like to move that they are true and correct? Thank you, Councillor Linwood. Seconded, Councillor Percival. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. We move to the 14th of November. Minutes, which is page 50 of our agenda.
Yes, you know, these are ones that where my notations are based on on the version of the minutes that appeared in the agenda. So I'm assuming that we're now all reading off the same page.
Oh, thank you for that. Councillor Percival, did you have a question?
No, just a correction. I seem to have been in 2 places at once. I'm present and I'm an apology. Home in bed with COVID.
Thank you, councillor. I'll change that.
We did expect you to be a miracle worker and be in 2 places at once, councillor.
Sorry about that.
So questions, Councillor Hopkins?
Yes, Mr. Chair, let's go through page by page 51. About 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 paragraphs down. The last sentence in the paragraph beginning, discussions have been held before to get the draft district plan. The last sentence reads, concerns are more about the extent of the overlays, SAM especially, and the effect the overlay has extended over the land. And I think I understand what that means, but I think it should read something on the effect the overlay has on land use or on activities on the land or something of that sort. There are 2 other corrections on that page. I think it wasn't 240 people who signed the petition. From memory, it was only 24.
No, councillor, it was actually 204, I thought. So there were over 200 signatories on that petition.
Or there were different petitions, weren't there? Because there was another one that I think only had 22 or 24.
Sorry, yes, yeah.
So
The second one had 22.
yeah.
So it depends which petition was being discussed.
So, but it's 240 the number, right?
Okay, we'll check that then.
And just on the next paragraph on that page, third sentence. A similar situation had arisen with federated farmers. And that had been a line drawn on that to say that we have done what we can. Again, I don't understand that, and it needs to be reworded, I think. When the reference to and that had been a line drawn on
That should be there, councillor.
and there had been a line drawn
Yeah.
on that. Okay.
So I'll change that.
Next page. Very first sentence, second sentence at the top of the page. The member said that had seen that third assessment, and I think the word
They, should be they.
yeah. Then under member question, just below that, with the independent expert advice that you are now aware of, is there a regular difference in approach? And I don't think the word regular is right. I mean, that one, is there a common difference in approach or something like that might be better, I would think. But again, I just don't understand what the word regular means. If it was used, it was probably inadvertent.
I think that's one for Mr. Campbell to clarify.
I think it might be just easier to remove the word regular to say, is there a difference in approach?
Yeah. Okay.
A bit further down.
Are you happy with that, councillor Hopkins?
Yes, yes. A bit further down, under the next member question, the last two sentences, there is still a lot of land that has overlays from what was in the draft. I think that should read that has overlays which vary from what was in the draft. And then I don't quite understand what the next sentence means, but we have since managed to get them into a form that is more acceptable. And I'm just
sorry, councillor, I didn't get that the first one.
there is still a lot of land that has overlays that vary from what was in the draft. And then the next sentence, Mr. Campbell, again, it's I don't think it quite says what it was intended to say.
Mr. Campbell, can you clarify that one, please? Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I know what it's trying
what
to
it's
say. It's around the fact that there has been changes or modifications made that some landowners are happy with. So it's just basically reflecting that, saying there's still a lot of land that does have overlays, but also a lot of the land has, the overlays have been modified on land, and landowners, not across the board, but some of them are happier with those.
Everyone happy with that explanation?
So do we need to change that last sentence, Mr.
Well, it
Campbell?
could be based on what Mr. Campbell was just said, it could be something like that. We have since managed to get the overlays into a form that is more acceptable to some landowners. Just staying on the same page, Mr. Chair, a bit further down, there's another member question, and I don't, again, I think the wording perhaps needs to be changed to make the meaning clearer. How much of this process has engagement been voluntary by council versus what would be required under the statutory process to get to the plan where it could be proposed? I think that needs to read how much of this process
involved engagement that
engagement with
was
council
voluntary.
That has been voluntary versus what would be required under the statutory process. A bit further down, there's another sentence, there will always be areas where there is conflict about not getting what they wanted, and I think that needs to say about people not getting what they wanted. And the last sentence in that paragraph, I think that the word being needs to be added out, the word are, economic issues are being considered as well. And I've got another question.
Sorry, councillor, I didn't get that one.
That's on that end of the chapter where,
End of the paragraph.
end of the paragraph, and where the RMA statement comes in relating to economic issues are considered as well.
Yep.
Councillor Hopkins is proposing inserting
Being.
Are being considered.
Yeah. And last one on this page, the next sentence, key point, regarding the voluntary aspect, it is important to recognise that the current focus is the draft district plan process, comma, as opposed to chair-voluntary aspect. And again, I don't understand what that means.
Well, I think that's a typed up note, so the chair was actually speaking there. So, Mr. Chair, perhaps you'd like to say what you were meaning there.
I think that what I was trying to elucidate was the difference between the draft and proposed, so that we're still working through the voluntary draft process as against getting into.
Okay, so I think on line 2, as opposed, then I'm going to delete to chair voluntary, as we need to recognise that we're going through a draft, as opposed, and then bring it to it's a repeat, as
Yes.
opposed to discussing a proposed plan.
Yeah.
So there's just been a line not edited out when it should have been. My apologies.
On the next page, very minor proofreader's correction. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines down from the top of the page. There are 2 commas after however, rather than only needing to be 1. So
got
I
that,
worked in
thank
the
you.
newspaper back in the day. Don't hate me. On the next page, second sentence, but he noted that a conflict of opinions remains between those affected by the SASM. And I think there's the next sentence, a phrase is repeated and one of them needs to be deleted. He believed council was entitled to try to mitigate or remedy some of the concerns, and also felt the position has been reinforced with a neighbouring council has by a neighbouring
Yeah.
council.
So has by a neighbouring council will come out.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the last sentence in that paragraph, he was unsure that how that would meet, this is the reference to the neighbouring council, how that would meet the Section 6 test. And come notification, it would not support those challenges on that basis. Now, I think what I said was it would be interesting to see if the change would be supported when it was notified, or I may have said it would be interesting to see if Okaha supported or challenged that change when it was notified. But as it stands, that sentence doesn't say what I said, and it's actually meaningless. So I think it needs to be amended. And that's definitely a matter of meaning.
Totally agree. So what would you like it to say, councillor?
Well, I probably would, he was unsure how that would meet the section notification test. If and when it was notified would probably be the best way to actually sum it up. I'm also, the more I read this, I'm absolutely convinced if you look at the 2 recommendations I moved, 2A and 2B, the headline underneath that in bold, motion amendment, remove point 2B, and me saying that I would remove 2B. I'm absolutely positive because all the conversations about the SASMs and nothing at all about the resource management submission process, which was recommendation 2B. So I actually do genuinely believe that motion amendment removed point 2A and me saying that I would remove 2A. So I think 2B in both cases should be 2A. There's clearly further discussion, and in the end, the resolution stands. But I think that at that point, that's what we were talking about.
Through you, Mr. Chair, my recollection was that there was originally 4 points, 2A, B, C, and D, and 2B came out, C became B, and D became C. That was what I minuted. So it was 2B that was removed.
So the reference to the new 2A and 2B on the previous page, that's additional to okay.
Yeah, they're at the bottom of page 55 is the new set of recommendations.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, everyone.
Yeah, no, there's a couple accepting the governor's advisor's point. Couple more corrections on that page. While Councillor Hopkins accepted the point, he explained again why he had alighted on the recommendations he had. And this is the paragraph starting. Councillor Tim Blackwell said he would be happy to second the motion. I'd like that last sentence to read, Councillor Hopkins accepted the point. Or while Councillor Hopkins accepted the point, he explained again why he had alighted on the recommendations he had and also had chosen to leave other matters to the submission process. And there's one other important correction on that page. At the very bottom, it says, sentence halfway through that bottom paragraph, he did not accept that an automatic delay would happen. It could do, but it was not guaranteed.
Yes. So there, thank you.
Moving to page 56 of the agenda, under map 65, Glenfern and Corriedale, second sentence reads, officer advice. The earlier resolution may address that, semicolon, the Waitaki River is quite deep. I just don't understand what that second clause or phrase, what relationship it has to the first bit and what it means. I think it either needs to be clarified or removed.
Mr. Campbell.
Yeah, I think that reference should come out to the Waitaki River is quite deep. Not sure what it was talking about.
Well, it is a true statement in places.
We just don't perhaps need it where it's there. Okay, I'll take it out. Thank you.
Page 57 of the agenda, again, a question of meaning. Under map 68 Maoraki, third paragraph. Member question, given that the set of recommendations and some reports were received, and there was one solution to raise the level of the water table, for example, if council put those mechanisms in place, would the hazard mapping be changed or remain the same? And again, I don't understand what it means. I think I sort of understand what it might be trying to mean, but I don't think I don't understand it.
I think you'll find that that was a question of Councillor Blackwell's asking if certain technical solutions were actioned, would it change the zoning or the mapping as outlined? Mr. Campbell?
Yeah, I think the correct word should be if there's one solution to change the level of water, change the level of the water table rather than raise. As my recollection, it was about how the water table in Meraki affects the geotechnical slip hazard. It was around the changing of the water table rather than just raising it.
what are we going to do? Leave it as it is, or?
I just suggest changing the words to change instead of to raise the level. Doesn't really change the intent of the questioning or meaning.
Okay.
I was just clarifying it was about the water table effects on that hazard.
So if we can move to page 59 of the agenda. David, the top paragraph, Mr. Campbell, I should say. I'm pretty sure that the last sentence in that first paragraph needs to be reworded a bit, because however the courts have clarified that it is part of the overall farming operation, semicolon, you are still farming, comma, but 1 year you may not do every activity. I think it should read, however, the courts have clarified that if it is part of the overall farming operation, you are still farming. But in 1 year, you may not do every activity. Would you accept that that's how it should read?
Yes, I think that clarifies the intent of that discussion. Yeah.
And in the next paragraph, first line, regarding a process for those who want them to obtain an existing right, I think the word them can be deleted. And the last sentence in that paragraph, the planning team can go back to previous district county plans. Now we either say district or county plans or delete the word county. And finally on that page, under discussion on section 32, also there's two other things on this page, discussion on section 32, evaluation reports and supporting technical documents. Member question Q, please explain the selection criteria for suitably qualified areas for completion and what briefing was given to them. I'm pretty sure the word area should be persons or experts.
Yes, that probably makes more sense. Yeah.
And
Just going back to the other points, but yeah, remove the word county. That's fine.
Yeah.
And
might I also suggest at the bottom of that page 59, it says Mayor Kircher joined the meeting in person at 11:13 a.m. I think for clarity, although it is actually discussed at the end of the minutes, I think that note should possibly read having participated previously by Zoom or something like that, because I have a feeling there are references earlier on to the mayor abstaining. And I mean, somebody reading the minutes for the first time is going to say, how can he have abstained if he wasn't there?
Councillor, anyone who's searching for that information would have surely realised on the first page, it actually says that the mayor had a mixture of absence, participation via Zoom, and in attendance at various times during the meeting. So because Mayor Kircher had an engagement in Invercargill, in Dunedin.
Okay.
Yeah, and then Zoomed as possible.
I was trying to help the mayor, not anything else.
No, well, I think subsequent to that, that you know, the mayor has explained why he abstained when he couldn't participate via the Zoom option.
Next page, second sentence, on the top of the page. The member still thought there were certain areas in the proposed plan where the subcommittee might put its foot down and say that more details were required on quantification of benefits and costs. And 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs down, paragraph starting Councillor Tim Blackler. The last sentence, Councillor Blackler advised, second to last sentence, Councillor Blackler advised that he was wanting to know more about the review of some specific chapters that had been agreed to and whether that had in fact happened. Just on page 62 of the agenda, at the very top of that page, after brief discussion, Mr. Campbell agreed that an officer level check would be completed. Action officers, so it's that what was the action, and obviously in this instance it was to check, but I think the minutes need to say that. And that's it from me.
Anyone else have any points to raise on those minutes? All right, would someone like to move that they're a true and correct record? Thank you, councillor Hopkins. I'll second that from the chair. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Right, we move on now to the agenda addendum. And there's first up is the resolution to accept or defer the.
Is that part two?
Yes. Now that as a prelude to that conversation, we can work on through this if it's the desire of members. Those of us who have had a chance to go through the documents, or we can take a brief adjournment to facilitate anyone wanting to get up to date with those minutes.
Might be fruitful to have a brief adjournment, might it not, just to make sure we're all on the same page, given the conversations we had
Are
earlier.
we scheduled for coffee, Madam Chair?
Oh. I could get coffee made if it's not there.
I think we're capable of making ourselves a cup of coffee if we want to.
Yeah.
So look, 20-minute adjournment? 10, right, we'll adjourn for 15 minutes.
It's later than chunk.
All right. We'll adjourn this meeting and reconvene at 10:30. All right, welcome back. We've going to move on, but first of all, I just want to raise a matter of urgent business to the subcommittee. In our conversations on the 22nd of August, we've inadvertently, and it was quite a comprehensive discussion around some flooding features in a series of maps. And we sought advice, further advice from ORC on those maps. But we've inadvertently failed to pass the maps. So with the leave of the subcommittee, I'd like to revisit that now and get those maps passed, because the report from ORC will be tabled in Mr. Campbell's report to the full council next week. Does anyone have any thoughts or objections to us doing that? Councillor Percival?
Yes, Chair, it's difficult to remember and recollect those maps without having a visual again on them. And if it's to do with the flooding area and the damage created by the confluence of Island Stream, Wairika, etc., and hitting the Kakanui, the difference which we wouldn't have contemplated would be the work that NZTA have done at the old mill site through there. So it's a different picture.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. We're not actually saying that we would change the maps because the basis of the discussion was, and it not only involved your patch, but also the north end of Oamaru, was that we needed to revisit ORC's mapping and also to acknowledge that the submission process gave people the opportunity to challenge those. Mr. Campbell?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So just by way of further background, so in August, we talked about flood hazard in those different locations. So it was around Napara, the upper reaches of Wairika, and particularly North Oamaru with Muddy Creek. And ORC had started work on the Muddy Creek remodelling. It hasn't been finalised, and then along came flooding in October. So it put their whole program back in terms of getting back to us. In November, we at the November meeting, we're expecting to maybe have some updated maps from them, but of course they got sidetracked with flooding. So the recommendation for those maps was lay on the table at that stage and didn't progress. As the chair said, there's an item in the report to council updating on the progress RRC have made and how they will input into our map updates. So it's going to be updating, giving better clarification on those areas. So effectively the maps which were parked 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, and then 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, and 60. That was kind of a subset of the maps we were looking at, but kind of picks up those areas. I know Councillor Blackford raised that question as well in terms of the flooding. So if we agree to, I guess, progress that recommendation that was parked, the maps won't change. They'll potentially change if ORC have updates that will come through in the submission process. So that's easy enough to adjust with the information at that stage. And they have said they will be looking on the ground around that Napara, Wairika Creek area to ground truth some of that like they have done in other parts of the district. The Muddy Creek one is a bit of a different one because it goes through the urban area, so there's a bit more work to do on that.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bristol.
Just a question, David. The existing maps will show the flood area and the zoning, so they're taken on and accepted now. And a lot of work should happen in the next year or two to preempt those areas being flooded. So down the line, can you change the mapping because of work that may happen as in gravel extraction and diversion of the creeks running into the Kakanui, say, for example, at Mahino? Is that, you can just change the maps willy-nilly? Because there will be people that, after any corrections are done and the land becomes less vulnerable to flooding, or perhaps completely alleviate flooding, then they might wish to develop that in some ways.
No, that's a good question, councillor. First of all, I guess, thinking of that Clark's Mill area where the road's been raised, I guess it needs to be probably tested with a flood to see what the performance is of that. And if it's designed to a certain flood level, what's the flood mapping based on? Is it a 1 in 100 year flood versus what's the road height increase being designed to? Is it 1 in 50 or 1 in 100? So I guess until it's tested, the ORC would probably be reluctant to remove some of those areas. Just particularly around engineered solutions like flood banks, etc., we've seen without burst and cause issues. So they tend to be more cautious around taking areas out, and I guess until it's been tried and tested or something's in place to guarantee there's no flood hazard. So they're the ones that would have to have the confidence that whatever's been done is going to remove that hazard entirely.
Any further thoughts?
Through you, Mr. Chair, on page 48 of part 1 of the agenda is where the recommendation was that went to the 22nd of August meeting that was not resolved at this meeting. So it's in the minutes, it's been put in there. So you can go back to page 48 and you can see that recommendation if there is an appetite to consider that now.
Well,
If that helps.
I think we need to try and resolve this. So in actual fact, the recommendation was made, but we didn't formalise that decision. That's correct?
That is correct. It was in the officer report that went to the 22 August. So that's a direct extract from there, except for the list of numbers. So the actual recommendation was in there.
Mr. Chair, may I, look, I think there's a fairly basic but also pretty important issue in front of us. As I understand it, the Act quite clearly says that mapping flood areas and determination thereof is a regional council responsibility.
Correct.
I don't believe we can unilaterally or independently, without regard to them or advice from them, amend the mapping. We can only do one of two things. We have requested that ORC revisit its maps, and they to date have failed to provide us with amended mapping. So there's two options. One would be to leave those maps out altogether, which I don't think you could actually do. The other is that they go in, and when the matter is considered by us at the time that we are debating notification, we can emphasise the importance of getting amended map boundaries from ORC. But in the meantime, unless and until ORC comes back with revised parameters, I think legally, in terms of the hierarchy of responsibilities and the delegation of roles, I think legally we're bound to say this is ORC's map, and essentially we back it in with the clear indication on our part that we want further work done on it in certain particular and identified areas for particular planning reasons.
Mr. Campbell.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. That's sort of largely correct. The starting point is that we have on those maps, there is a range of things, including the flood hazard, which has been identified and mapped by ORC. what they have signalled and through our requests is that there's an opportunity to revisit some of those areas. Through the draft process, they have relooked at areas at the request of landowners such as up at Kauru and made changes. As I said, Muddy Creek's still being worked through in terms of what it looks like on the new map. And Napara, they've said they will need to ground truth to better define that flood hazard. So at the moment, it's their information that is still on the maps, and they have said in due course they will be able to update that. It's the timing issue that's caused this sort of hold up.
So, look, effectively the oversight was mine as chair. I've got to own the fact that on closing the meeting, I acknowledged that we had 8 further maps to pass, and that we hadn't actually passed the maps as discussed. So, if the subcommittee are supportive, I'm happy to move that the proposed mapping is adopted, subject to further information that's coming from ORC. Seconded, moved by myself, Madam Chair, seconded by Councillor Percival. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried.
Thank you, Chair.
So we get back to part 2 on page of our agenda.
Don't go back to the start. Is this, well, that's not final page, it's part 2, is it not?
Yes, I'm just trying to find it.
Second part,
Pardon? So it says agenda addendum, it is part 2 though.
Yes. And can we just, have you got a page number there?
That starts again.
Yeah.
Well, I've got it as a separate document.
Yes, it is a separate document.
Yeah.
Part 2, second one there. That one.
Thank you. Nothing having a bunch of technophobes. All right, so we move to the fact that we need to resolve to accept these papers or defer them. Is there any discussion on not accepting them? All right, well, I'll move.
Yeah, look, Mr. Chair, I was simply going to say, I'm not sure that, well, I know that we haven't had an adequate time to consider some of these later minutes. I'm also aware that they are simpler in a lot of instances than the previous minutes have been. And now I'm jumping from agenda part 1 and part 2. It's not user friendly. But if we were to defer or like not to accept these late items now, I think we would be delaying other processes in a needlessly pedantic way. I think we have the opportunity today to actually revisit these minutes, and most particularly the decisions, which are the key elements of them going forward. So I would be happy to support the position you're proposing to take.
All right, thank you. Well, there's no further speakers. We have the motion as moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Against?
Oh, sorry, Mr. Chair, I do think there is one. I think actually with the benefit, I should raise.
Sorry, councillor, that we procedurally, I had put the motion and it's been voted on. So we can't go back and revisit a substantive change.
No, I wanted to ask a question of you. I'm looking at the recommendation on page 3. That's not the recommendation the recommendation simply is to accept late items for
The
consideration.
late agenda items, that is correct.
Yeah, so we haven't voted on the recommendation appearing on page 3.
No,
Yes, you have.
we have,
No, well, so are you saying that we voted on A, B, C, D, E, and F?
Through you, if I may clarify this, Mr. Chair, your request here is that you either accept the late agenda items as listed, A, B, C, D, E, and F, or you choose B, which is to defer them. You have chosen A, and then you are going to consider A, B, C, D, and E, F under A. So you either accept or you defer.
so those other bullet points simply are referring to the minutes that we then now have to consider if we've accepted them.
Right, so the word accept doesn't mean confirm. It means simply that we
It
are.
means it means accept them as late items for consideration at this meeting. For consideration alongside the other agenda items included in part 1 of the final agenda papers already published for this meeting. So what you're doing is accepting part 2 of the agenda.
Thank you for that explanation. All right, so there's a item 2 is the governance advisors updates on minutes. And the recommendation is that we receive and note the updated information relating to 12th December meeting of the subcommittee. Yes, and uses the information to assist and guide in the review of decisions.
So if I may speak to that, Mr. Chair, in the 5th of December meeting, I gave you an overview of how the chapter and maps and chapters, maps, schedules and appendices had tracked changes in them and that the minutes would support that. So this is just an update now on what is in this meeting's agenda because we didn't get through all of it last time. So it's really just, this is what you've got. We weren't able to do full minutes for everything. We've done the best we can. You now have all of the decisions that have been passed by this committee during its deliberations from the 21st of November through to the 5th of December. They're all there. So it really is just saying, here's the decisions that have been taken and the information that is included in the decisions only documents do meet the requirements under clause 28.2 of standing orders, matters that must be recorded in minutes. We haven't called them minutes, we've called them decisions only documents, which is the difference. But you could consider them as being minutes because everything is there that is required. Thank you.
Actually, I think, Mr. Chair, speaking to you, I think that the name given to this truncated sets of information is probably quite important. And in my view, although I was initially surprised to see only essentially a discussion of minutes that basically outline the resolutions with very little discussion about or very little coverage of what was discussed. I do recall that that's precisely what we used to get at full council meetings. And given the concern about minutes and given the belief that they need to be seen and adopted prior to any further action occurring with regard to the district plan, I don't believe these should be called decision documents. I think they should be called minutes. And I think they should be recorded as such when they go forward from here to the 17th of December council meeting, bearing in mind that there are alternative platforms available to people who might wish to look in greater detail at matters of debate that occurred prior to the vote on any of the resolutions that are included in these minutes.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think the councillor has made a very good point, which is why we put in the reference to clause 28.2. You could consider them minutes. I also discussed with Mr. Cook that if there was a request from this committee for full minutes, or fuller minutes, shall we say, based on the decisions only documents meetings, then I would be happy to do that with acceptance from the chief executive about resourcing issues, and it probably wouldn't happen until January. But you do have that option to amend and say, as Councillor Hopkins has said, they could be considered minutes, or you could ask for the production of fuller minutes, but that would not happen until January or February. Thank you.
Mr. Parnley?
Just in terms of the potential direction we're taking as well on minutes. So as you know, we've engaged some support looking at how we do things within this space, and we haven't had a chance to receive that full report and digest it yet. But the suggestion going forward is that minutes essentially follow this format going forward, that they capture essentially the decisions, what was resolved, any actions coming out of it. And if there was anything significant discussed that wasn't covered in the papers that influenced that decision, that would be documented. But the whole discussion doesn't need to be documented because it is captured on the recording. If anyone wants to know the full debate and discussion, it's captured there. There is a record of that, and that essentially the minutes, now that we have that recording, only need to capture what was resolved, and anything significant that was discussed that changed that resolution from perhaps what was recommended in a report.
Just thank you for that explanation. Cognizant of the fact that we have a number of sets of minutes and 20 minutes calendared in to decide them, I would suggest that we progress as quickly as possible without being reckless. But I'd also ask committee members to consider would they be available to reconvene at 12:30 at the completion of the next calendared meeting.
Today?
Or something today, yes.
I'm happy to.
Maybe. Mr. Mayor, you've got another engagement this afternoon, haven't you?
Yes, I do. Just having a quick check on what time I need to get away to Civil Defence and Emergency Management meeting in Dunedin. Yeah, it would be a wee bit tight, to be fair, but yeah, if I could be at it for a wee while, I would, but yeah, it won't be very long.
Councillor Percival, are you able to work on? Thank you. We need 4 for a quorum, is that correct?
Yes.
All right, well, let's proceed with the items in front of us.
Mr. Chair, seeking to expedite matters and looking at the review of the minutes that were tabled. Just if somebody could reference the page, the 7th of March, I think, is the first one that's
Correct.
listed in the heading. Bear with me for a moment. I think there is one correction I would make or suggest to be made, needs to be made on page 5 of that, on page 5 of that agenda.
Just hold that thought, councillor. We need to formally receive the governance advisors update that we had discussed previously. Move councillor Hopkins, seconded councillor Linwood. All those in favour, please say aye. Against?
Mr. Chair, I'll move the adoption of the minutes of the DPR subcommittee conducted on the 7th of the 3rd, 2024, with one amendment, and that's on page 5 at the very bottom. DPR SC 2023. I'm moving the adoption of the minutes of the DPR subcommittee held on the 7th of March 2024, with one correction, that being the resolution DPR SC 2023-074 at the bottom of page 5. The full stop appears after the word plan at the end of the recommendation.
Through you, Mr. Chair, in moving that, the councillor referred to them as minutes. They are actually being presented to you as a decisions only document. So would you like to address that, please?
Well, we will adopt the terminology as used. That they are, we're moving the decisions only document. If the mover and seconder are happy with that.
Yes, but in that case, I foreshadow that I'll move a generic change to the wording at the end of the meeting.
All right, thank you. All right,
So procedure, I'm just questioning whether that should come before, because once they're adopted, to then go back and rename them would be challenging. So I don't know whether you'd want to do it for each set, just move that they be recognised as the minutes for each one as you move it.
Yeah, I'm happy to move that all items tabled as decision documents for the 12 December DPR subcommittee meeting be described hereafter as minutes.
do we have a seconder for that? Thank you, councillor Linwood. I'll put the motion then. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried.
So on that basis, I'll stand by my original resolution.
Yes. And I had put that motion, Madam Chair.
Yes.
So we move on then to L4.
I think we need to vote first, Mr. Chair.
Oh, well, that was the question I asked, and all right, I will put it. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. We now move on to L4.
The actual change of the name.
That was. I think it was. No, it was councillor Percival seconded it. I'm sure. The moving of those minutes when, councillor Hopkins moved and Percival seconded. Let's have a go at seeing if we can make this harder than we really have to. All those in favour of the motion as put, say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carry.
Thank you.
Right, we move to L4, which is the interestingly, in red is described as the unconfirmed minutes of the reconvened meeting of the 4th and 18th of April.
Yes, they were full minutes, Mr. Chair. That's why they're different.
That might be where we have that in review, but I might be seeking assistance of council. Lynn. Here with me. Sorry.
Insulted councillor, did you say?
Yes, Mr. Chair, on page, Mr. Chair, on page 2 of these minutes, I've got matters on page 2, 3, 4, 5, 12, 14 and 15. I do not believe the minute should say, Councillor Percival moved something, he wants to move the following motion. The next thing we read is motion later lacked for want of a seconder. Now, in my view, that hadn't happened. And so I believe the procedural comment actually belongs after the sentence, the chair asked for a seconder to the motion. When no one spoke up, the chair declared the motion lapsed for want of a seconder. And at that point, the phrase in bold, motion lapsed for want of a seconder, should appear. The procedural comment belongs when it took place in the meeting, not to be preempted. In my humble opinion.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I have moved that already and it's in these minutes.
It's not, it says exactly, oh, it does, sorry, oh, thank you. No, I hadn't, I apologise for not noticing that. On the next page, second paragraph, in the middle, one is fast tracking, which we are preparing a submission on to come to you, and that mirrors the COVID fast track legislation by and large. The second part of that is later this year, and then a bill passed next year. And I think that has to read, and then a bill is to be passed next year.
Again, Councillor Hopkins, I already made that correction, so I think you might want to compare your notes against. So obviously I read your amendments in the review room before I attached these to the agenda yesterday.
There's a whole sentence under the paragraph notwithstanding. Yes, effectively the SN, we're on page 3, effectively the SNA matters subject to the content of Associate Minister Hoggard's letter are signalling that the government is starting on that phase 2 work. And yeah, that hasn't been changed, and that sentence needs to be reworded. I think it could mean effectively the SNA matter subject to the content of Associate Minister Hoggard's letter have been signalled to be addressed, and that the government is starting on that phase 2 work. But as it stands, it is meaningless.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I did talk to Mr. Campbell about this yesterday, and what we have written now, which is in the agenda, effectively the SNA matters referenced in Associate Minister Hoggard's letter are signalling that the government is starting on that phase 2 work. Would that address your?
Yes, it would. Thank you.
Thank you. So that is as stated in the agenda part 2, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
So just going to page 5. Under that paragraph starting Biodiversity Advisor Max Crow, there's a sentence that reads, and a third very small patch close to the Wainakarua, less than 1 hectare of Kakanui forest, that also a new landowner was disputing the significance of. And it doesn't make sense.
I have rewritten that one as well.
It's not actually Kakanui, it's Kanuka.
Kanuka, yeah. So I have taken on board that you said it didn't make sense, councillor. So what I've written here is, and there was a third very small patch close to the Wānaka Rua, less than 1 hectare of Kanuka forest, the significance of which another new landowner was disputing. Would that address?
No, thank you.
That's okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Now, if we can go to page 12, comment from the chair. I think for the purpose of clarity, the second sentence would be better rewritten. And the change I've suggested has been made, so that's fine. Page 14. Under additional discussion about communication from residents. He felt that those in the latter group, I had suggested we add, he felt that those in the latter group who were making submissions seemed to be saying, we are residents and you should listen to us. And I think also that same sentence, and any suggestion of predetermination or taking sides based on the fact that we have got to us, to our residents. And that's been changed to listen, so that's fine. And the last one from me on the next page, that's been changed too. So those are my corrections on those minutes.
Is there anyone else who has any issues they wish to raise on the minutes of those two meetings? Would someone like to move that we accept those minutes?
With amendments as agreed.
Thank you, Mayor Kircher. Seconded by yourself, Councillor Hopkins, was it? All right. So moved by the Mayor, seconded by Councillor Hopkins. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. We move to L5, which is the 20th of June meeting.
So these ones say decisions only documents, and they are now minutes. Mr. Chair.
Please, just on 34 areas of fun. Mr. Chair, there is quite an important issue on the 20th of June. If I can find the agenda item, the item in these minutes, it's not 34 of part 2, it's something else, it's somewhere else. If you can bear with me for a moment, there are a series of resolutions on page 3. This is extremely frustrating. I'll go to part 1, it might be in there. But there are a range of resolutions that I think need to be revisited because as they are written, as they appear in these minutes, I don't think sorry, I'll go back. This is really important because I think these have to be worded as recommendations to the council. Page 34. Right. Found it. On page 3, if you look at the resolutions there, DPRSC 2024-091, and I think DPRSC 2024-092, and probably 093 and 094, in some instances we have revisited earlier resolutions.
Correct.
Oh, the key thing is, it seems to me that in each case, those earlier resolutions would have been recommendations to council. Because I don't think we as a subcommittee can, well, we could recommend removal of SNA 12, but I don't, and I think that went to council subsequently. But that would be the extent of our powers in that regard. The same thing applies to 092 and 093. And I think that each of those resolutions needs to be reframed as recommendations to the council rather than recommendations that would suggest that we have autonomously and unilaterally made the decision on our own behalf.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm just looking at the officer report that went to the 20th of June meeting, and its title was Consideration of Various Council and District Plan Review Subcommittee Resolutions. They were all in the recommendations there, and there was no recommends to council in the officer report. So 1AB, 2AB, 3A, 3B then says recommends that council accepts Schedule 6, which I believe has been moved forward. And the others 4, 5, 6, and 7 were about amending or going back to a DPRSC resolution that has subsequently, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Campbell, been addressed through resolutions that did go to council. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm just looking at the agenda firstly for the 30 July council meeting. So this is where the recommendations from the district plan review subcommittee meeting on the 20th of June ended up. So that included the resolutions 089, so DPRSC 2024/089, included 090 and 095. And just to clarify, items 091, 092 and 093 are addressed in the report to council for next Tuesday, the 17th.
I was pretty sure that we voted on SNA at that council meeting that you have just cited, and a rereading of the resolutions 091 and 092, where it simply says that the original resolution passed by the committee stands, provided that original resolution was a recommendation to council, then that's fine. And I get that now, and I apologise if I muddied the waters.
And I think that is exactly what happened, councillor. There was some that stood, and then when they went through to council, there was changes and there was further debate. So it was a request that you revisit those ones, and does it stand, or do we need to change it or revoke it? And then there was the subsequent reference through to council. What these minutes are lacking at the moment, because they were one of the last sets yesterday, is the cross-referencing to the council minutes. So that will be added when I do the archival version. So I might just, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, I might just make a note of that.
Yes.
To Matt.
And then, of course, when we reconvened the meeting after lunch, we moved into the consideration of the maps. And the subsequent discussions.
Just a question. I'm assuming that when these documents, those highlighted in red on pages 4 and 5 and 6 will just become normal black type as per the rest of the material.
Yes, they can do that. It was just that I needed you to understand that what I'm trying to do is to cross-reference them, and I wanted it to be easy for you to identify. But if that is the wish of the committee, then I can change all the red cross-referencing to black type. Is that what you wish to do, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, that's fine, thank you. So no further questions on those sets of minutes. I'm happy to move from the chair that we accept them. Someone second that? Councillor Linwood. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? Carried. At this stage, I'm going to have to adjourn the meeting as there's another meeting calendar to take place. And we will reconvene at 12:30.
It might need to be 12:45, Mr. Chair, because I have a live feed into the next meeting and I need a production break to switch to another live stream.
Right, thank you. Then we will be reconvening at 12:45.